Hi everyone. In today's session, I'm going to cover API testing using INGenious Playwright Studio. Before jumping into the tool and how to do the API testing, first let's understand even why API testing is so important. APIs are the backbone of applications. If your API doesn't work correctly, the entire system can fail, regardless of how good looking your UI is. API testing validates the core business logic and data processing and ensures that it's functioning properly. If you're writing any test cases at the UI layer, they're always very costly in terms of time and execution and resources. Hence, the API testing becomes very crucial that you cover most of your test cases at the API layer. So it improves your speed for the test. Instead of writing at the UI layer, you write at the API layer. Also, it's easy to integrate with the CI/CD pipelines, and you can test your functionality, your application before even UI is being developed. You can find issues early, so it helps in finding the bug or any issues early rather than you're waiting for the UI to be developed. You can write more test cases at the API layer, which is like could be covering different error codes, covering edge cases. Also, at different data validations, you can easily do at the API layer. So, hence, the API testing becomes more crucial as compared to the UI testing. Now, what kind of different terminology is being used when you are using API? So, API contains like you have a request which you are sending, then you get a response. When you are getting a response, you would like to validate the response code is correct, like response status is correct. You can validate the schema as well, like response body being returned is as expected. Also, there are various information you can validate as part of your API testing. Now you need to understand how to create API test cases. So before creating API test cases, just try to understand the workflow. So for any testing, you need to have your data created first. So in that case, there are different verbs, methods used in the API testing. So you have to create your data first. You can use post call. If you would like to update the existing data, you can use a put call. If you want to fetch the current data, current record set, and ensure that whatever data you created via the post call, you would like to verify that, you can use a get call. If you would like to delete the current data, current records being created, you can use a delete method. So there are different methods and the verbs being used. You can use these different options, create a workflow that you create your data, you verify the data is created successfully using get call. You can update your records, then you again can do a get call and verify that yes, record is updated successfully, like that. Along with that, there are a few things which you need to understand, that when you're doing API call, the API call might contain some authentication. There are different kinds of authentication we're going to cover as and when we take the examples. Also, you need to add the headers, which we will cover as well in the later sessions. After this, like as I mentioned already, status code and the tag, or you can verify like entire response body as well. So these are the some of the things which you need to consider when you are going for an API test cases. Now, for the today's session, I've just picked up one of the example. Maybe it makes it easy to refer to some actual calls which you can play around with it. You can use it. So I have selected this pet store. So in this case, there are different calls. As you see, this is a petswagger.io. So what you can use is a pet calls. So you have a post call, which is like add a new pet to the store. If you would like to get the pet which you have created, verify the pet is created, you can use a get call here. If you would like to update the existing pet details, you can use put call here. You can delete the pet which you have created as well. Similar to pet, there is a store. You have a get, post and delete calls here. There are different user calls as well which you can use in. So for this session, let's have a look at the how to create and or how to add a new pet to the store. When you expand this, you can see this is the body of the pet. So this is a sample JSON being provided. And this is a parameter which is a content type which gets added as a header. So just click on execute and see what happens. So if you see, this is a request URL. and this is a response body. If you see the request body, what we have passed is this one, right? So you are not passing id should get generated automatically. Status is available, and you have passed name as doggy. You can enter any other information if you'd like to. You can even upload a photo of the pet as well. So in this case, what we are verifying, that in the response it's returning 200, and in the response body this is the information coming here. Now, there are some response headers as well, which are returned, so we don't need to verify. Maybe let's take a simple call that we take this URL. Let's go back to our IDE. So I created a folder here, which is we are calling as a test scenarios. And then I created my first test case as create a pet. So when you click on this create a pet, right, and just save it, if you go back, add a step. If it is not being added, click on the object name. Now, as we are doing API testing, you have to select the web services here. So select web service. Now, first action, if you look at the page, what was the first action is you need to do a set endpoint. And the input is going to be here. If you see that I have copied that pet store, the set endpoint, and there is no condition. So if you go back to the original URL here, in the INGenious Playwright Studio um, GitHub documentation. So if you look at that, the first is set endpoint, and then what we are going to do is a post REST request here. Now go back to Studio again, add another row, and what we are doing again here, your object is going to be web service, and this is going to be your post request because we are creating a pet. Now in this one, what you need to do is you need to get, if you go back, you need to get this body. So again, click here. If you click, you see here it's opening an editor. It is opening into another window basically. So I'll just paste it here. This is how it looks like. So what you can do, if you'd like to change name of the pet, say for example here, um, so say for example you change the name as border collie. Now this is a post request. What you would like to do next, as if you go back to the page, you have done, and now you are doing assert response code basically. So go back to Studio, and let's try to assert here. So add another row as web services, and then in the action say assert response code. And what you're asserting on, that it should be 200. Okay, it's a code, right? It's not a response body, it's a response code we are looking at. So in this case it's a 201, but for us it's going to be 200, because if you look at the response here, it is actually 200. That's a simple test case. Now before we execute, just let's save it and right click on this. If you remember, I mentioned there's a browser option, which is no browser here. You need to select that because it's an API call, so you don't need to run with the browser. Now click on run and click on this black icon here. So right now, if you see that the call is being, so driver, it's a payload is done. Step number 2, it's complaining that response received is status code as 415. What is the error code as 415, right? So if you pick this up, if you don't know what the status code is, right, what I would suggest is go to your browser. Now come here and say, what is this status code? So in this case, it's unsupported media type. That means you need to add header here. So we haven't added content type. If you remember in the original request, um, if you go back to the original request here, in this case, you have a header type, right? Content So this content type is application JSON. So we need to add this as a header type. Let's go back and see how we can add header into the tool itself. So to add the header, just always remember that you set the endpoint and you need to add header before you actually making a post call. So click on the first row, click on the plus sign to add another row here. The object name going to be web services. Action is going to be add header, and input is going to be our header name was content type equal to application slash JSON, and just save your changes. Um, Execute it again and click on this console icon just to see what's happening in terms of logs. Looking at the details, as you see, the step one is your endpoint is set. Step number two is header is added. Step number three is your post request. If you see here, it's completed. And step four is you are asserting on a status code, which is 200. So your post request is completed successfully. So if you'd like to view more details about the test case execution and would like to look at detailed steps as well, so you can go to the report here at this location, and you can see that scenarios pet API testing. Your test case name is create a pet, and then status is pass. If you would like to see the details, just click on this create a pet, which is going to show a detailed report. And there are 4 steps as we have added, which is set endpoint, add header, post request, and assert your response code, which is 200. And you can see the status here. If you'd like to see the details of this post REST request, just click on that and you can see there's a request and response. If you click on a request, it's going to show a payload here about the request. If you click on the response, it's going to show you the response coming back. So you can see there's an ID added. Also, just added like a border collie updated. I think that's the name I gave when I executed when I created the test. You can see the same thing in the request as well. So this is how your request response will look like in the report itself. Yeah, that's pretty much on the report side of it. If you're interested to have a look at more details instead of just looking at pass and fail or an API test case. So if I go back and say, for example, I change the status as to O1, in this case, my test case should fail. So looking at the logs, then say test case is passing and failing, it should fail as I mentioned. So you see the status as failed here. So the expected response code is 200, but we have given input as 201. So the test case is failing here. That's pretty much it on the API post call perspective. But in case you would like to create an entire workflow, so I have another set which I've created here. So in this case, like first 4 steps remains the same. The next call is to get pet. So this is the call again I got from the Swagger page, and I'm checking all the pets by the status which is available, and then doing a get call. So the first step is always going to be set your endpoint, then you do a call, whether it's a get, post. If it is a post call, as I called out, if there is a header, you need to add header. If there is authentication needed, you need to do authentication as well. So I have added a response code as 200 on this call, that it's returning at least some it's not returning any non 200 code here. So call is going to return 200. The next one is I'm going to update the details of the pet. So if in this case, I'm using a put request. If you look at the response, what I'm using, so whatever the response coming from here, I'm using that response here. So in this case, if I'm picking that ID and I'm saying border collie, I've changed the name to say 2345 something, right? And I would like to make sure that call is again, it's returning. You need to check the status code first. So again, assert on status code, or you say response code here. So in this case, I'm going to give 200 and see what happens. And after that, I would like to do a call again using whether this particular pet is created or not successfully. So let's try to let's try to run these three test cases together. So we are creating a pet. We're just simply doing a get call. We are not checking the same ID here. We're just doing a get call that they are pets with the available status. And then what we are doing is we are doing a put rest call just to update existing pet information, where we are just updating the name. In case you would like to change the status, you can do that as well. So let's just try to execute and see what happens. So first I'll save it before execution. Click on this run button. Now click on the console just to see the logs, what's happening here. So you see the first call is pass with 200. The second call is saying that response is received with the get call. And third step is, yeah, as I mentioned, I gave 200. And this is what the request body was for the put call. And I updated the border collie as border collie 345. So name was updated, and you can see the response return is 200. Now how do you ensure whether it's, there are different ways to validate that. You can do another call to validate whether you have any pets available with this name. Or what you can do, you can try to use ID. But before we are using any of that, let's have a look at the report and see how it looks like with three test cases together being executed. So I'm going to go to the UI again, navigating to the report, what we want to have a look at. I'll just close the screen for now. It's a create a pet, because this is my another collection. What I have created a set of requests. So the first one was a post request. The next one is your get request. Third one was your put request. Okay, so let's have a look at the put request, and let's have a look at the request first, that I am updating a name as border collie 345. Now, if I click on a response, in the response, if you see that for a given ID, the ID was ending with 46706. This is the ID, and this is the name of the pet. So in a response, you can see that the details are actually updated. So this is a response text, and this is a request test text if you see at the end of the request. I'm just going to close all of these tabs, going back to IDE again. So this is how the workflow looks like. What you can do, let's have a look at the Swagger page and see if we can find a call to check with the ID or a particular name. So if I go, so it's checking with the ID. Let's try it from here first. So if I go back to my request and go back to our results again here, you will not see the details, but we can pick an ID from here. See if that call works, at least even from Swagger. If it works, then we can try that call from here, from our ID as well. So I'll just enter a pet ID here and say execute. So now see it's not working from the Swagger itself. Then it looks like the this call is not working as we expect. Let's try to see if we have anything else here. So I'll do try it out, say available and execute. And now you can search here, like, do you have that ID? Looks like this ID doesn't exist. Now what we can do, the name we updated. So here, you see that why you're not able to find with that ID is actually, I think this is an issue with the pet Swagger page itself, because it's not matching with the IDs being given here. So you have a name as border collie 345, but if you pick that ID, go back to your get call here and say, for example, in this case, if you see execute, it's still not returning. That means this ID functionality is not working. So we won't spend much time in just looking at that. You can do one thing is, if you would like to validate, because this is a big response, but you would like to filter out and say, hey, I would like to verify if in any of my response, right, in any of my responses, am I getting a tag as name with the value as a border collie? So we can have a look at that possibility and say how we can validate those kind of responses as well. So how you can validate the response body or some of the elements or tags in the response itself. So let's add another row here. It's going to be web service. Here what we can do is assert. what we want to check a part of the body. So response body contains, and then again, it's going to be our test data. Your What you're checking is that name contains border collie. So let's pick a name from here, whatever we have given, so that we are able to match it exactly. So name equal to border collie. This is what we want to verify if it is updated successfully. Now just save it and try to run it again. To view the details, just click on this console icon, and you see that the last test we have added, that response body contains the text we wanted to. So this is like a sequential steps how you're testing the workflow. But if you'd like to test with a different request body and checking different parameters, you will need to find a different approach. So we'll cover that in a future sessions. But for now, this is how you can add different endpoints and create a workflow out of it. In case, like say for example, if you go back here and say change this 345 to something else. And now, if you're going to, because you're updating that request uh, with that different name, and see if your test case pass and fail. So in this case, since we're updating, there was only one request with that number, so that request should fail. So click on that again, click on this console icon, and if you go back and if you look at your response, the last test what you're writing, the response body does not contain the name equal to this 345. That means your test what you have written is actually working fine. So this is all about how you can do API testing, which is especially around the REST APIs calls, and how you create a workflow, and how you can verify your functionalities, application functionalities through API as end-to-end workflow. And that's all for the session. Thank you all for joining in.